Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture, Europe's largest prehistoric settlements, burned to the ground every 60 years. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. Between approximately 400 and 700 BCE, in what is now Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine, a civilization flourished that built the largest settlements in the prehistoric world. The Cucuteni-Trypillia culture, named after two discovery sites, one in Romania and one in Ukraine, constructed settlements of up to 15,000 people, larger than any known contemporary settlement in Mesopotamia or the Levant. These were not cities in the conventional sense. They had no written language, no apparent temples, no obvious social hierarchy, no defensive walls. They were dense, organized settlements of tens of thousands of people living in rectangular buildings arranged in concentric circles around a central open space. And every 60 to 80 years, with what appears to have been deliberate intention, the entire settlement was burned to the ground. The burning of Cucuteni-Trypillia settlements is one of the most puzzling behaviors in the archaeological record of any prehistoric culture. More than 500 of these settlements have been identified across the region, and virtually all show evidence of intense burning events. The burning is not random fire damage. It is systematic, thorough, and appears to have been planned. Buildings were burned in a specific sequence in some settlements. Items were removed from some structures before the fire, but not others. Ceramic vessels were sometimes smashed inside buildings before burning, sometimes left intact. The temperature achieved by the fires, measured by the degree of vitrification of the clay building materials, was high enough to suggest the buildings were deliberately fueled, not just set alight. And then, after the ashes cooled, the community built an entirely new settlement on the same site or nearby. Why would a civilization burn its own city every 3 to 4 generations? The theories are fascinating. The ritual destruction theory holds that the burning was a sacred act, the end of a temporal cycle, a regenerative ritual in which the old world was destroyed to enable the new world to be born. The social leveling theory holds that the burning prevented the accumulation of individual wealth and status symbols that would create inequality, resetting the social order every generation. The ecological theory holds that the burning was a practical strategy for soil management, using the ash from the settlement to fertilize the surrounding agricultural fields that had been exhausted by 60 years of cultivation. Whatever the reason, it produced one of the most distinctive cultural signatures in European prehistory, a civilization that chose, repeatedly and deliberately, to destroy everything it had built. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. What separates a civilization from a collection of villages? Not technology alone, but organization. The capacity to coordinate thousands of people toward shared goals, to store and transmit knowledge across generations, to build institutions that outlast individuals. These are the hallmarks archaeologists look for when they define a civilization, and for most of the 20th century, the oldest examples they could identify dated to around 3500 BC in Mesopotamia and Egypt. But that benchmark has been steadily eroding. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, discovered in the 1990s and excavated since, consists of massive stone circles with elaborately carved pillars depicting animals, abstract symbols, and human figures. It dates to at least 10,000 BC, roughly 6,000 years before Stonehenge, and older than the invention of pottery or agriculture in the conventional sequence. Someone built it. Someone organized the quarrying, transport, and precise placement of limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Someone knew what they were building and why. That level of coordinated effort implies a society more complex than any model of 10,000 BC predicted. Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Every few years, a new site expands the timeline further. Ancient stone structures in Indonesia have been dated to 25,000 years ago. Complex astronomical alignments have been found at sites in Africa predating Egypt by millennia. The human story is older, richer, and more turbulent than the standard narrative allows. When we look at lost civilizations, we are not chasing fantasy. We are attempting to recover chapters of a history far longer than any currently recognized textbook will tell. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture, Europe's largest prehistoric settlements, burned to the ground every 60 years, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Cucuteni-Trypillia culture is named after two archaeological sites. Cucuteni in northeastern Romania, discovered 1884, and Trypillia, or Tripoli, near Kiev in Ukraine, discovered 1893. The culture spans roughly 400 to 700 BCE in the forest steppe and steppe regions between the Carpathian Mountains and the Dnieper River, a territory covering portions of present-day Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. The culture is identified by distinctive painted pottery, one of the most elaborate ceramic traditions of the European Neolithic, large rectangular mud brick and wattle and daub buildings, clay figurines, primarily female, and the characteristic settlement burning practice. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the megasites of the Trypillia culture, located primarily in the Uman district of Ukraine and dated to approximately 3700–3400 BCE, are the largest known settlements of the European Neolithic. Sites including Talgenki, Majdanets, and Dobrovody cover between 100 and 450 hectares and contain evidence of hundreds to several thousand buildings. Population estimates for the largest sites range from 6,000 to 15,000 people, making them the largest concentrated settlements in the world for their time period. Satellite imagery and magnetic susceptibility surveys of these sites show the building footprints as dark squares arranged in concentric rings around a large central open area. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The painted pottery of Cucuteni-Trypillia is considered among the finest ceramic art of the European Neolithic. Vessels are decorated with elaborate curvilinear designs in red, black, and white paint applied before firing, incorporating spiral motifs, serpent imagery, and geometric patterns that appear throughout the culture's territory across its 700-year duration. The consistency of decorative motifs across this vast region and long time period suggests a shared symbolic vocabulary maintained by a community of potters connected by training or contact. Several scholars have proposed that the pottery's motifs encode cosmological information about the sun, rain, and fertility. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the building burning events have been documented through multiple lines of evidence. Red-fired clay walls indicating temperatures above 600 degrees C, achievable only with deliberate fuel addition, the systematic sequence of burning across sites, and the preserved contents of some buildings that burned with their inventories intact, while neighboring buildings were cleared before burning. At the megasite of Majdanets, magnetometry survey revealed that a large number of houses were burned simultaneously, far more than could be accounted for by accidental fire, spread in buildings separated by several meters of space. The systematic nature of the burning across hundreds of sites, spanning 700 years, indicates a culturally embedded practice rather than a series of accidents. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the Cucuteni-Trypillia cultural area overlaps with the region that later saw the expansion of steppe pastoralists, the Yamnaya culture, who carried Indo-European languages westward into Europe. Ancient DNA studies have shown that the Cucuteni-Trypillia populations were predominantly of Anatolian Neolithic farmer ancestry with limited hunting-gatherer admixture, and that they were largely replaced by steppe populations around 3000–500 BCE. This replacement coincides with the end of the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture and may represent either population displacement, cultural assimilation, or a combination of both. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture appears to have been largely egalitarian in social structure, a feature that distinguishes it from the hierarchical civilizations of the same period in the Near East. Burials from the culture show minimal differentiation in grave goods between individuals, suggesting relatively equal distribution of wealth and status. There is no evidence of monumental burial architecture, no burial mounds or megalithic tombs, no evidence of a warrior class, and no apparent evidence of an elite administrative class. How a settlement of 15,000 people was organized and provisioned without hierarchy is itself a major archaeological puzzle, and the settlement burning practice may have been specifically designed to prevent the development of inequality. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture, Europe's largest prehistoric settlements, burned to the ground every 60 years. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the ritual regeneration theory is the most widely discussed interpretation. Under this model, the burning of settlements was a deliberately chosen cultural practice tied to a cosmological belief system in which destruction and renewal were linked to the agricultural cycle, the passage of generations, or a specific temporal unit. The 60-80-year burning cycle corresponds roughly to a human lifetime, suggesting the community renewed itself when the generation that had built the settlement had died. The fire itself may have been sacred, analogous to the ritual fire practices documented in later Indo-European and Slavic cultures, and the burning may have been conducted as a public ceremonial event. Supporting evidence includes the systematic preparation before some burnings, clearing valuables, arranging or breaking objects. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the social leveling theory, developed primarily by archaeologist John Chapman, proposes that the deliberate burning of settlements functioned as an anti-accumulation mechanism, preventing any family or lineage from accumulating heritable wealth in built structures, land improvements, or stored goods. By resetting the settlement periodically, no individual or family could gain a long-term advantage over neighbors through inheritance of property. This would maintain the equality evidenced by the burial record. Comparable practices of deliberate property destruction or redistribution, potlatch, are documented in other ethnographically known societies with similar egalitarian social structures. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the ecological renewal theory, proposed by several environmental archaeologists, argues that the burning served a practical agricultural function. Intensive cultivation in the settlements surrounding fields over 60-80 years would have progressively depleted soil nutrients and increased weed pressure, making relocation economically necessary. Burning the settlement would have produced a massive input of wood ash nutrients into the surrounding agricultural zone, temporarily revitalizing the soil. Under this model, the burning was not primarily ritual or social, but was an adaptive agricultural strategy, a form of long-cycle swidden, slash-and-burn management applied to entire settled communities rather than individual forest plots. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question, is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture, Europe's largest prehistoric settlements, burned to the ground every 60 years, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes archaeomagnetic analysis of burned Trypillia buildings has documented that the firing temperatures in many structures exceed 600 degrees C, with some areas reaching 800-900 degrees C. These temperatures are not achievable by simple structural fires in mud brick buildings, but require significant additional fuel loading. Either the buildings were stacked with combustible materials before ignition, or fuel was actively added during the burning. The consistent achievement of very high temperatures across many separate burning events at many different sites confirms that the burning was deliberately managed rather than accidental. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented magnetic susceptibility surveys, non-invasive surveys that detect changes in soil magnetism caused by burning at Trypillia megasites have revealed the simultaneous burning of large numbers of buildings across entire site areas. At Majdanets, a Ukrainian site covering approximately 200 hectares, the magnetic survey showed that the final burning of the settlement occurred across the entire site area simultaneously, not building by building, as would be expected in an uncontrolled fire, but in a coordinated conflagration that engulfed hundreds of structures at once. This pattern is consistent only with deliberately set fires and requires extraordinary coordination of an entire community. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the recovery cycle, the consistent pattern of new settlements being built at or near the site of burned settlements within a relatively short period, demonstrates that the burning was not the end of the community, but a transition. At many excavated Cucuteni-Trypillia sites, the stratigraphy shows multiple superimposed settlement layers separated by thin lenses of sterile soil, indicating repeated cycles of occupation, burning, abandonment, and reoccupation. The new settlements are generally similar in layout and size to their predecessors, suggesting the community maintained its social organization and population through the burning cycle. If the burning had been catastrophic or forced, we would not expect the same community to return to the same location. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture, Europe's largest prehistoric settlements, burn to the ground every 60 years. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Cucuteni-Trypillia culture has received increasing international research attention since the early 2000s, when remote sensing surveys began revealing the full extent of the megasites. The International Cucuteni-Trypillia Association was founded in 2008 to coordinate research across the three countries, Romania, Moldova, Ukraine, in whose territory the culture's sites are found. The conflict in Ukraine since 2022 has created significant challenges for archaeological work at Ukrainian sites, including some of the most important megasite excavations. The National Museum of History of Moldova in Chisinau and the National History Museum of Romania in Bucharest both hold major collections of Cucuteni-Trypillia material. The broader significance of Cucuteni-Trypillia for debates about the origin of European social inequality has been a major theme of recent research. The culture demonstrates that extremely large, complex settlements can exist without hierarchy, writing, or monumental individual achievement, and that the transition to stratified society was not an inevitable or universal development from complex settlement, but required specific additional conditions. The settlement burning practice, far from being an irrational behavior, may represent an extraordinarily sophisticated social technology for maintaining community cohesion and preventing the economic disparities that lead to conflict. Understanding how it worked could have implications for modern thinking about community resilience and economic organization. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture, Europe's largest prehistoric settlements, burned to the ground every 60 years from the historical record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Cucuteni-Trypillia ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle, it is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process, and the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. if you are watching on Facebook. Tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.